the Ancient Illumination series in the Mbani Chronicles, and I'm joined by Kurana Akiba.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kurana Akiba. I am an artist and cosplayer, and I am here hanging out with brother.
Yes, we are here at the Westminster Hall. The exhibit here is Poe in Comics, and we're here to talk about the reading, reviewing, and writing of bedtime stories, followed by an actual reading, I believe, of the manga classics by Jennifer Dudley. She will be reading that. Bedtime stories. We've all pretty much probably had experience either reading them or having them read to us as children.
Absolutely.
I have yet to write any kind of a curious history.
Yeah.
I was actually watching a documentary last night on Netflix where they were going through the history. And the thousands of versions by country that they have different depictions of Cinderella depending upon what region the story came from. The Grimm brothers were also mentioned because of their work with the fairy tales. They were basically trying to put this almost etymological tree together. Original version of these stories from, but it was very interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it was very interesting seeing like there was like a Japanese version of Cinderella, and they were given like mystical powers by like some type of serpent, and it was very different from traditional wicked stepmother and stepsisters that were mean to the servant girl who had to go out and be in this magical pumpkin carriage. There were many. The other versions were a lot more horrific. Slipper.
That's
portion,
accurate. Yeah.
Where instead of like there was a bird in one of these versions where they had parts of their foot to try and fit their foot into the glass slipper.
The bird or the mom also was like chopping off pieces of their feet or their toes. And then like the prince doesn't notice until the blood is seeping out of the shoe.
Yeah, and the version they were talking about had some poem like "cuckoo, cuckoo, it does not fit in the shoe."
Yeah,
something weird.
Yeah.
But there were literally depictions of the pieces of foot being cut off in order to try and fit into the shoe for Prince Charming to come back and like,
so funny.
Yeah, it was weird. So there are
I love that.
nothing new under the sun. So there's
Oh, yeah.
many versions of these stories, these fairy tales, these bedtime stories. I think the last time we were talking about how did it switch from getting your children ready for bed to let's scare the bejesus out of people.
Yeah, this is actually funny enough. This is actually where my bag is. So I have a podcast called Noir Narration, which actually is they lean more towards scary stories, but they are about like fairy tales and folklore, mainly from cultures of color. And so a lot of these things, when it comes to it, it's a lot of research, and you're playing the telephone game. So it's one of those where, like that, you're trying to figure out where the story comes from. You know, what are adaptations from certain things? Where it's like, where did this part comes from? Has it come throughout history? Has it developed, or is that a part of the original tale? All those little wonderful things that honestly I just find so fascinating. But that's a love finding those like little notions here and there of just like how many different versions a story can have, from like that The Little Mermaid, which always tickles me whenever there are people that like it's not accurate. You don't know accuracy.
No, there are so many versions of that story.
Right.
And that's actually in itself, if you go down to the origins, or at least one of the origins, is kind of a horrific tale in and of itself with what actually happens in that.
Yeah, right.
Not
when she
the
dissolves
Disney,
in the sea foam.
Yeah, not the Disney versions we get, but the actual kind of horrific fairy tale that was original.
Which that's kind of this bag as well, you know. a lot of their like original movies are really just fairy tales or
Remixed.
yeah, remix, yeah, repackaged.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think the documentary I was watching alluded to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Ah, okay.
That a
Yeah.
young Walt Disney went and saw in another country this thing being played out and decided he wanted to do his version of it. And that's what he ended up doing. So the one
That
that
makes
we
sense.
get with the Seven Dwarves, there was a Russian version
Yeah.
where instead of seven dwarves, there were seven knights.
Yeah.
And Snow White was actually, weirdly enough, their sister.
Mhm.
But one of them mentioned something about being in love with.
Yeah.
It's a weird rendition, but
Yeah, right.
it's kind of funny how stories change. Like maybe they
Right.
change for different sensibilities depending on where you want to tell the story. So you have to tailor it kind of to your audience.
Yeah, right. No, that's fair. I was more familiar growing up with because in my house we've spoken multiple languages, so we were more used to Blanche Neige as opposed to the tradition. Well, not traditional, excuse me, the Disney version of Snow White. So it was far more far blood, or like I guess more intense
Mhm.
than the Disney version of it. That's we go ahead and we see. So it's so interesting
Yeah,
that when it comes to how people can kind of like take things and not regurgitate,
yeah.
but to take things and then create something new and to keep it going and keep evolving as we go. We progress through the years.
We progress in different social sensibilities. You think of Sleeping Beauty and the
Yeah.
that story and the idea of consent, as you have to wake her up by kissing her, but she obviously can't consent to said kiss if she's
Right.
asleep.
There's yeah. Right. Um, and then even when talking about or even like going back to Grimm, there have been so many times where I've seen like newer shows taking these things and adapting these same stories and kind of spinning it into a modern day. There is the show that I was absolutely obsessed with. I'm not sure if anyone else is familiar with this, but it was called Grimm, two M's, and it started. Yeah, it was
I
so
remember.
good. I like how like as soon as I saw the audience was like, yeah, it was very very well done story. I really enjoyed it. And then there was also a short. It's very short lived. But I think you can still catch it on Paramount Plus. It's
Mm.
called Tell Me a Story. And what they did is that each season was dedicated to
Is that the one where
children's.
they're basically robbing a jewelry store and they have the pig masks on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep,
so
that
it's
was the
kind of
one.
like the three little pigs, and the big
Yep.
bad wolf would actually be
Mm-hmm.
the one guy who's investigating. So he's kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
cop or the one person that was tied into the story, so he's trying to figure out what's going on.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
That one was really great. And then they had a season two that was based off of Beauty and the Beast, where actually they gender bended a little bit. And it was a like a singer songwriter. So basically, she was like but then the way that they kind of like gave her the air of a princess or someone of royalty. Where, but then she went into a horrible accident, and then it caused her to become basically the beast.
Hmm.
So, and going through that with Belle being like basically uh, was now Bo, and Bo was actually her security guard, I think, at one point. So
Hmm.
it was a little while since I've seen it. But it was really good the way that they really interpreted
I remember
Same story.
I think one of those stories where the mom and dog
it. Yeah,
kind of got the substitute teacher, serial
I
killer,
believe so. Yeah, I
and they
believe
had
so. I think that was another one.
they had
Yeah.
tied that into the fairy tale some kind of way
Uh-huh.
thematically,
Yeah.
which kind of goes along with. I'm wondering when it changed from just bedtime stories. I've said this repeatedly to the kind of spooky stories that we tend to see, especially around like camp time when you're camping. Let's gather around the campfire
Yeah.
and melt some marshmallows and make s'mores and let's
Mhm.
scare the bejesus out of.
It's kind of how it was, right? Things like Aesop's fables and stuff like that. These stories were created to, kind of like strike the fear in these kids to protect them.
Mm.
Which I mean, great, right? But I mean, it's what it was. It was supposed to go ahead and kind of like strike the fear in them, make it more memorable. So they were going. So strangers. I'm not walking the woods at night by myself. I'm not doing, like certain lessons that are learned through those, even though born out of enough to us even knowing about them today.
I hope that they actually follow the message that
right.
Mhm.
So much more than stranger danger,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, no, it's like even when it comes to like traditional stuff, away from saying traditional, from more well-known stories like that. And what I always find is a shame are the stories that are kind of getting lost from history. And then little bit from that definitely are reminiscent of other cultures and things like that as well. Um, that or are if they are more well kept secrets in those other cultures that we may not be aware of. Like things from stories from like the Gullah people and that have resided mainly in like North South Carolina, I believe, as well as Georgia because it's right along that waterline. And little things like that, where their bedtime stories are still there are some elements that are similar, but can be extremely different from movies that you know a lot of other cultures are more familiar with.
Mm.
Like one that particularly comes to mind is the boo hag, which I'm not sure if not a lot of people are aware of. But the boo hag is basically I guess it could be anywhere from like as if people are more familiar with that term more than anything else.
They're talking about like skinwalkers as far as like the Native American skinwalkers.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So going back to if you are, then go ahead and just walk in the woods at night. Be careful and mind your
Yeah, bedtime story, but a story of warning, and not just to children. I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, tale that they used to tell us when before you go overseas, basically not to be messing around with people in the country and just go with every this old wives' tale about some military member that basically got drugged, wakes up. I don't know if you ever heard this in a bathtub of ice
yes.
to find out
yes.
that they felt his back and there were stitches and his kidneys had been stolen. There was a note next, totally a fake story.
Oh,
It's not real, but it's being told repeatedly to service members to have them be wary of the surroundings, be wary of what they drink and who they go and associate with later. So it's kind of one of that.
Wake up without your kid.
You wake up without your kiddies and a note telling you to, you're alive, but call the police immediately. And it's like, it's kind of really convenient for all those things to happen simultaneously and for you to have actually survived them extracting an organ from you while you're asleep. You just wake up in an ice bath.
Right.
But yeah, I am curious to see. Maybe we'll find out when that turned from just bedtime to spooky, scary stories came about.
Right. Or maybe it's the opposite. It started scary and then it's just kind of like dulled down
I
over
think it
time.
did. Yeah, I think it did probably start the scary, most horrific version, and they just kind of dumbed it down so it would be more digestible. Actually, someone's like, you know what the real story is?
It's normally us.
Yeah. This is really an allegory for something else.
Right,
You don't want to be part of, but they made it nicer for you to tell it to your kids.
Yes. Absolutely. Tell me, when it comes to bedtime stories, uh, tell me about your personal journey with bedtime stories and how that kind of like come into fruition. Is it because your parents told you, or did you
My
research
mom, I
yourself?
don't think, read a whole lot of bedtime. This is kind of my was that I was in the green eggs and ham.
Yeah.
Um, the one of the more positive ones, or the super positive, all the places will go. Or some other
Oh,
places will
yes.
go. That one is like just a super
Yeah.
positive story.
That's crazy.
Usually, it's either a bedtime story or the first story you read a small child when they're like getting ready for the day. Type
Yeah,
of thing. Like,
right.
oh, the places will go.
Right? Just kind of like curious them up for it. Yeah, that's fair. Mine was always so I had two very different when it came to my parents, two very different types of stories kind of growing up. When it came to my dad, it was very much either comic books or it was like the scary stories, right?
Mm.
And
At
then
bedtime?
right, right, right. A lot of things start to make sense, right?
Did you like that? And then they slowly back away and close the door and shut the lights.
Right.
Ready
Exactly.
to sleep now, right? Oh,
Right. Things like Shel Silverstein. So like where the sidewalk ends and all those kinds of stories too. Where there was more like inspiring things and very like uplifting, pretty things, all that kind of stuff. But when it came to movies, they were the opposite.
mm.
Mom would do the horror movies and the really scary ones. And then dad would do like the really like fluffy movies. You couldn't tell when it came to these with these two, right? So having that nice range of different types of stories is probably like the one thing that really above everything else that I enjoyed. That was probably like the topic that I really liked. Being able to like have these different sources of stories,
Mm.
that have these different tales coming at you, and the fact that there was no same night where we read things over and over again because there was a nice little plethora of different types of not only from different cultures, different backgrounds, different walks of life of these stories, but a range of different types from the poetry to like things like Aesop's fables, where the sidewalk ends again, like I was talking about before, and then comic books and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
And perhaps the divergence in story types from just the bedtime story to the spooky tales is kind of a subtle way of introducing balance to children. Like some things are going to be really sunny, but there's also a dark side to life that you need to be wary of. So maybe it's a slow way of integrating that element into the storytelling that you kind of you express or you expose them to. So
Yeah.
that even though you're not saying that stuff is like this, but things can kind of go awry and go off the rails into a very dark direction in life. So
Yeah, right.
be prepared, kids.
Right. Right, for real. Like there's so many different versions, like the Swan Princess. There are a few versions where I saw where it's like, oh, it's a like curse and blah, where like she still turns human at night, but she turns human at night because, and then we go ahead and the prince finds out, kisses her, and then her curse is lifted. It's like, or it's the one where the swan, where she has several brothers, and they all turn into swans, and she's not allowed to speak until she has sewn seven. Right? Uh, Tunics. It was supposed seven tunics, and then as she's going through the motions, like and she like slowly runs out of time, and she doesn't finish one of the seven. So, but she was able to go ahead and have all seven brothers wear all of the tunics, but she doesn't finish an arm on one. So for the rest of their lives, the last brother still has like a swan wing
Mm.
at the end. So, bro,
Yeah.
like so.
Are you familiar with Rapunzel?
Hmm.
Did you know that there were many different versions of Rapunzel as well?
Hmm.
You have the most, I guess, wider known one where she's left up in some ivory tower and grows her long hair so that she could let her hair down and have this prince climb up. And she's actually cursed to be in this thing. But there's another version where he climbs up. She ends up getting pregnant.
Hmm.
And because of that, the witch or the person that put her gets mad and then basically exiles them to the woods,
Yes.
and they all go away. And I guess the initial reviewers or whatever, I guess, panned them for letting it go so dark, so it was changed, so chatted and some other episodes.
Right.
So that's
They
kind of,
had like conversation.
we get the nice version of that story. Doesn't get so grim and kick them out. Now they get to stay, and it's just a slight nice story.
It's just a tift.
But it started out more of a spooky tale.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like there are points in the tale where I've read some versions where the prince actually gets cursed by the witch and blinds him, or like his eyes get like
thorns.
Yeah,
He actually, on his climb down, his eyes get poked out with thorns. And that was part of the documentary.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So I'm like, that's so many.
Yep.
Keep going. Okay. We may be going in and out, folks. So if there's a little bit of pause, don't let that stop you from sending us any questions.
Pick up some technology.
Exactly. But yeah, right? And I was like, yeah. So he goes ahead and he gets the thorns. I've had, I think I've seen one where it's actually they were like picked out. His eyes were picked out as well.
That's a nice visual.
Yeah, right, for real. And all that kind of great stuff. But yeah, no, it's changed a different. And then even with everything else, including like even when it comes to post stories and how they've kind of how they've existed and evolved not only throughout time, but then also through different cultures as well. Even when it's like the manga that Jennifer will be reading, the fact that we were talking about the different language utilized and about how it's been like translated and retranslated, and there's like slight differences in that because of how other people have interpreted those stories.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Yep. And since we are here at Westminster Hall in the Bowen Comics exhibit, downtown Baltimore, Dudley will come read the manga classic version of the stories of Edgar Allan. Oh, so you guys can enjoy that. And it's been fun talking to you.
You as well. You have a great day. So much for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Hi, friends. All right, bear with me for just one moment, okay? So I'm just pulling up our slides so that we can do the Raven. And yeah, thanks so much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So this is Manga Classics, Stories of Edgar Allan Poe. This is a really, really great collection that features four, I believe. Yeah, four of Poe's known works. I chose The Raven to read, but there's also The Telltale Heart, The Castle Dorado, The Mask of the Red House of Usher. This adaptation of The Raven is by Stacey King, and the art for this manga is done by. I'm gonna go off camera so that we can focus on the story. If I can figure out how to do that. Oh. Sorry, thanks for your patience, y'all. Kind of new to this new to this, and for some reason, I'm not seeing what I'm used to seeing. Here we go. All right. So, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whose angel's name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. That is it. That it is, and nothing more." Suddenly, my soul grew stronger, hesitating, then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened the door. Darkness, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering long, I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." This and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely at my surely that is, let me see then, what threat is mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and a mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the stately days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy name is on this night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly form to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above their chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculpted bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. Sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word as his soul in that one word he did outpour, nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes had flown before. Then the bird said, Nevermore. I startled at the stillness, broken by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters is only shop and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster till his song's one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat upon a cushion. Sorry, y'all. Straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy until fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining, with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen cleanser, swirling by Sepham, whose footfalls tingled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by the angels he has sent thee. Respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird of devil, whether tempter sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, dislocate yet, all undaunted on this desert island enchanted. On this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, didn't we just do this? Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by the heaven that bends above us, by the God we both adore, this soul with sorrow ladeneth within the distant Aden, it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word or sign of parting, bird or friend. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thy back into the tempest and the night's plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, ever flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeing of a demon that is dreaming. And the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. The end. Thank you for reading that with me. I'm sorry I was a little tired today, but I love this poem. It really is beautiful. Thank you so much for joining Artway Alliance today at Westminster Hall. Thank you so much for the Poe House, to the Poe House for having us here today. And we look forward to doing another day of programming tomorrow. All right, have a wonderful day, y'all.